Hi, this is Jonathan Chua, and I sometimes go by John.
And I'm Joseph Gonzalez. I sometimes go by Joe, and we would like to welcome you to episode 0 of the brand new Jonajo Podcast.
And Joe and I actually have been friends for a long time, and that's why, and that's the whole where we're gonna kind of go with this episode 0 today. We're going to basically just talk about how we met and like what this podcast that you're going to be seeing from us is going to be like, that kind of thing, to kind of segue into like the whole series. So this is just basically an introduction of of what the uh of what the both of us have
Mhm.
coming up for you guys.
Right.
So, just a little bit of a basic introduction about Joe and I and our friendship. So, basically, we actually met during COVID times. During COVID times, specifically, it was around 2021 when we started becoming friends.
Right.
I actually at the time, because it was COVID, it was all locked down. Like you can't go out without a mask,
That's
and
right.
unfortunately, at the time, there were Karens too. There were Karens
Yeah.
too that were being rebellious that it's not
Mm,
100% back to normal.
exactly.
Yeah, it was just a mess at the time. It was just really challenging. It's times that we were communicating through Zoom only, and
Zoom only. Yep.
the way that I would connect with my friends at the time was through social media, and I opened up an Instagram account.
That's
Um,
right.
and I'll have the links to our Instagram accounts down in the description below, so you'll be able
That's
to
right.
see that. So I started an Instagram account in when right when the COVID pandemic started, and one of my interests back then was this one DreamWorks movie called Mr. Peabody and Sherman,
That's
and
right.
it was honestly a very heartwarming movie. It's really, and it also
I
has that
love that
really
movie.
nice it really has that nice touch to it. And
Absolutely.
um since then I've and how I've known Joe is actually Joe is also another fan of Mr. Peabody and Sherman, if I remember
Yep.
correctly.
That's
That
correct.
yeah, you had something on your story on Instagram,
Mhm.
and one on your Instagram page that was like saying like, "Hey, does anyone here want to like start a Mr. Peabody and Sherman group chat, or
That's correct.
some sort of like Instagram group with this movie?" And I said, "Yeah," because it's something that kind of interested me in a way,
Hmm.
something interesting to see. And then yeah, since
That's
then
right.
we followed each other on Instagram, and we've been friends for 3 years ever since.
That's correct. It's correct. And another thing I would like to actually share, another something that really sparked a huge thing in our friendship was I remember one day, I mentioned that I visit Disneyland often, and then Jonathan mentioned to me that he's also a massive
Yep.
Disney fan, and he told me that, he went the last time, like the time he went was grad night, correct?
Yep, it was grad night, and I actually got that from Joe a little bit, that interest with Disney, because another thing that Joe and I have in common, we're both from Los Angeles, but
That's correct.
however, sometimes I'm not home. I'm actually here. I'm actually right now. I'm sitting here in Prescott, Arizona, for university. So
Hmm.
I'm actually studying. I'm actually studying here in Arizona for a little while, but for the most part, I am also a Los Angeles local, just like Joe is.
That's
And
correct.
since and also it since the Mr. Peabody and Sherman group chat that Joe set up, um, I also found out that he also goes to Disney frequently, and that kind of piqued my interest in a way, because Disney and Peabody and Sherman, of course, animated and that kind of
That's
thing,
correct.
they
Yep.
they share a lot of similarities.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And yeah, that's kind of what segued my interest into Disney in a way as well.
Hmm.
So that was also another thing that's also that also started through my friendship with Joe. So
Yeah.
that's one thing that
Uh-huh.
honestly was really fun to see. But besides Disney and besides Mr. Peabody and Sherman, there is one niche interest that Joe and I have in common that is going to pretty much lay the groundwork of what this podcast and all the future episodes that you're going to see from us, as well as albeit all of the content you're going to see on this channel. Um,
Correct.
yeah, there's this one niche interest that Joe and I share in common. So
Hmm.
feel free to take it away on that.
All right, yeah. So here's what happened. I believe it was sometime in the mid 2021s, like May or April of 2021.
Yeah, we were
Uh,
starting to come back from COVID. Yeah.
that's right. And I remember Jonathan went with his family to Las Vegas, and they stayed at the Tahiti Village, which is kind of like a Polynesian themed, like timeshare kind of thing. I
Mhm.
stayed there years and years ago, and honestly haven't been back since. But that's how what I remember from it. But one thing I do remember,
Mhm.
Jonathan sent a video of I believe it was Tower 5
Yep, it
elevators,
was
right?
Tower 5. I remember.
Tower 5, and then it was like the elevator. Do you remember what the elevator said?
Yeah, it was like it said like it either said like please exit when the doors open or we are experiencing minor technical difficulties. And then
And
since then, Joe actually asked me this one question, is it an Otis Gen 2? And I was like,
yeah,
yeah, and I recognized that. And I was like, like how did you know this is Otis? How did you know what this is?
uh-huh,
Then he told me I was obsessed with elevators ever since I was a kid.
yeah,
And I'm like, oh my God, me too. And then since then, we've that's another niche interest. That's a niche interest that we're going to share with you guys. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, from this episode going forward. That's all that this podcast and all that you're gonna see in this channel is about. Our
That's
interest
right.
with elevators and yeah, it's interesting in a way that especially like their mechanical beauty and everything that it has to offer.
That's
But
correct.
it's however, it's not just us two that are into like elevators. It's not just us. There's actually a huge community
That's
started by
correct.
this one guy named Andrew Reams,
Hmm.
YouTube username Diesel Doocy.
That's
Um,
correct.
he was the founder of the elevator community, and he started this whole thing back in the early 90s. But
That's right.
there are a few other people. There are a few other people in the elevator community that have a lot of like, character in them.
Oh yeah,
They have a lot of like persona, and there's this one guy from Canada that
yeah,
honestly have both piqued both Joe and I our interest, honestly,
yeah,
with
and
this
then
one guy.
I'll go ahead and talk about it, which actually leads me into how I got into this, obsession. So long story short, before I introduce who this guy is, um, way back when I remember a long time ago when I was like 3, we stayed at the Treasure Island Hotel in Las Vegas. And what I
Mhm.
can vividly remember in my mind was the Dover Travelomatic 4s, the guest elevator specifically. I was just, holy crap, I was obsessed with that. Like the
Mhm.
buttons and everything, it was really cool. And so on one day in my head, I was thinking, I wonder if there's any like sort of documentation, of this particular elevator. So one day in 2010, I was on YouTube and I happened to search up, a Treasure Island Las Vegas elevator. And without a doubt, there were two videos uploaded by this particular YouTuber who is from Canada, like Jonathan said, named Kira1106 or Kira1106. And he posted two videos of this particular elevator. One was the low rise, floors 4 to 14. That was the very first one I saw. And that video, I was like, oh my God, there's, documentation. And those were the elevators I remember. And then there was a second video I found out right after that, and this one was the mid-rise. I believe it was floors 15 through 24, like something like that,
Yeah, it's 15 to 24. Yep.
15 through 24, and something very funny in this particular video happens. Once Kira reaches floor 15, he says something that is just absolutely hilarious, and you know, take a look. We'll show you. Take a look.
What elevator is this? Hey, this is an Otis.
So yeah, absolutely hilarious.
Yeah. It's honestly just really hilarious, like the way that he has like so much persona and he has like that kind of energy and enthusiasm to record elevators. And
Absolutely.
especially that someone also, I mean, I wouldn't say it's really like a huge night and day difference with him coming down to Las Vegas from Canada. He's from Vancouver to be exact. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, I don't think it's much of a night and day difference with the elevators because I've been to Canada a few times and their elevators look very similar to what we have here in the US.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's really interesting how much, character he has with that. And
Mhm.
also in a weird way though, he kind of ruined by saying that he kind of ruined a little bit the Dover Traplematics because in 2018 or so
Yeah.
they actually started modernizing
They
they started
modernized it. Yeah.
modernizing the Dover Traplematics.
Yeah.
If you walk into the Treasure Island right now, you'll see that it's all covered in Otis Series 7s, which are the
Otis
newer
Series
type of
7s. Yep.
Otis elevator fixtures. It's not the Dover Traplematics anymore because
That's
they
correct.
were starting to get older, and unfortunately Kira said that. But I mean
Yeah.
I mean in a way that I won't burst any bubbles, but honestly I have to say the Otis Series 7s right now, they're not that bad. They're not that bad.
Yeah.
But I much prefer the Traplematics.
Yeah, the Shuffle-matics, they're oh my god, they're just something. They're
Yeah.
rarely rare type of Dover. You
Yeah,
rarely
and
see those
also they
anywhere
they
else.
run phenomenally. Like
Oh my
it's
god, they run perfectly.
Yeah, they're like really, really smooth in that. And
Yeah,
despite Kira, there's so many other people, not just Diesel Ducey that I mentioned earlier, and
yeah,
and Kira. There's so many other people in the
uh-huh,
in the elevator community that are really
yeah,
into elevators and that kind of thing.
absolutely.
Yeah. And one other person that honestly is really also another diehard elevator fan.
Yep,
He's from Houston, Texas, I believe.
Houston. Yep,
And
that's correct.
Joe and I watch his videos a lot, and it's
Oh yeah,
yeah, and he has also that huge persona in him. His name
mhm.
is Jim Lee, but
Jim Lee,
his handle is Jim Lee Elevators.
leaders, that's
And
correct.
he films a lot of elevators around the country, and sometimes even in a few of them. I remember one of his latest videos in Asia, I believe. Um,
Yeah,
and one of his older videos, he would always like go and like tell the other passengers about like what the elevator is like, and like
that's right.
all those little tidbits, like those niche tidbits kind of like that kind of appeal to us elevator enthusiasts, basically. And
Absolutely.
yeah, that's basically Jim Lee. He also, just like Kira, but Kira honestly has a very, very nice and very thick accent to
Absolutely.
his like pronunciation and that kind of thing. But Jim
Yeah,
Lee also is really enthusiastic as well. Like every
yeah.
time someone asks, like, wow, you know a lot about this stuff, and like, oh, like this seems interesting. And he goes, I'm an elevator photographer, and he's like
Yeah,
really
exactly.
happy about it. He's so
Very
happy,
happy.
so passionate in his own thing.
I love it.
However,
It's a
though, I did also want to point out my friend my my interest with elevators didn't actually start from a passion of it. It actually started the opposite way. I actually had a fear of elevators at the beginning. And my
uh,
passion developed by overcoming that fear of elevators. I was actually one time I went to the Westin Bonaventure, which is in the heart of downtown LA.
mhm.
It's along Flower and Figueroa Street.
Yeah, I'm
It's
figuring it.
that
Correct.
cylindrical building built by John Portman, who was an amazing
Oh yeah,
architect way back
amazing.
when. And yeah, I was paranoid because I actually, well, one, I was terrified. It was a glass elevator, like and it's like open to like the outside. Like, when you go when you go into the elevator, it goes through the atrium and then goes up and outside, and you'll see the whole landscape of downtown LA. I was
Mm-hmm.
terrified because of how high up we were, but it didn't get too terrifying until I actually got stuck one time in
Oh yeah.
got stuck one time in specifically in the blue tower in
Mm.
there's actually if for those of you who are familiar with the Western Bonaventure, each of the towers has three elevators. Two of them are in a pair, one of them on its own. I got stuck in the one that was on its own on the blue tower that yeah, because the door lock had some issues. But what I was really paranoid about before was that the I was worried that the cables would snap. I was worried
Yeah.
that they were gonna snap and it would in the elevator, the huge capacity of an elevator would just free fall and just
Right.
and that was the part, but that was the part I was a little bit paranoid. But after a little bit of research and into the engineering that goes into building elevators,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of gained my confidence and in a way I started liking elevators as well too. And
That's right.
that's basically where I'm at now with my passion for elevators. Just like
A-
um yeah, and that's how again Joe and I started our passion. We found out about each other doing this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then real quick before we segue on with the rest of the podcast, or I say episode 0, there's one more particular person in the elevator community who, in a way, is not very well known versus like
Hmm.
Diesel Ducey or Jim Lee or etc. And one that actually continued my passion for like elevators. I found out shortly after Kira is by the name of Shadywood79, who
Hmm.
actually did another Treasure Island video. I found out shortly after, but I found out he is a Las Vegas local. But the
Yeah.
one thing with him, he well, number one, he knows about all like the smaller hotels, like the local hotels and stuff like
Hmm.
that. He does
Including Sam's Town, if you remember
Sam's
that.
Town. Yeah,
If you guys are
absolutely.
familiar with what Sam's Town is, yeah. Sam's Town is like one of this. It's also another niche Las Vegas hotel as well too. It's got a beautiful atrium as well with like three glass elevators. There's Schindler's unfortunately about to be modernized very soon,
Yeah.
and
And
he filmed the Sam's Town if I remember correctly.
yes, he did. And then the thing is too, I want to quickly bring up his persona in a way.
Mhm.
I mean, in a way, I like him. Don't get me wrong. However, I feel like he's very, very, very monotone.
Yeah, I've seen a few of his videos as well. He would go
Uh
like,
huh.
"Here we come to the elevators at Sam's Town Hotel," and it's like not as like I could tell probably in the inside of him that he's like really excited to do this, but the delivery, I mean, it's also interesting in a way to also see the
Yeah,
monotone aspect as well too of it. But
absolutely.
but yeah, I also really like other elevator people like Diesel Ducey, Jim Lee, Kira, who are really enthusiastic and actually show that they're enthusiastic. But I know there's some people who are also a little bit monotone but I know inside that they also, are also as passionate as everyone else with photography of elevators and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
One last thing, though, I did want to mention, and this is a little bit of a recent event, and while we're on the topic of Vegas. So one thing I did want to mention about Vegas while we're on this kind of topic here is that a few days ago, the Tropicana closed to the public. They closed to the
That's right.
public, um, and they have had this huge history
Oh
of
yeah.
they've had this huge history of like their operation, their casino, and everything. And I wanted to bring this
Yeah.
up because Tropicana was an integral part of the elevator community. There have been several people, such as National Elevator, another person who's a California local as well, and
Yeah.
Kira himself. They went to the Tropicana and filmed the elevators, which were not even that old at the time of recording.
Yeah. And then real quick, I want to go ahead and just talk about just a brief history of the Tropicana. They opened their door in 1957. It's old. It's
Yeah.
his Vegas history, and it's located on the Las Vegas Strip, right across from the Excalibur and across from the MGM Grand. is located off Tropicana Avenue. And then also a lot of people, one thing that people don't actually know about the Tropicana, they're owned by DoubleTree by Hilton, which
Yeah,
actually I never knew until like a few years back, which is actually pretty
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, they were owned by Hilton, but sadly, unfortunately, not anymore after they closed a couple days ago. That now it's going to be scheduled for demolition. It's scheduled for demolition this October.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so that's interesting how like, how just sometimes these hotels how like they just evolve. They just come and go, and sometimes they
No,
choose to get modernized and renovated and everything, and just to keep like to upkeep like the cleanliness and the new standards of the hotel. And then sometimes
yeah,
they'll say, I think maybe it's just cheaper, or it's I think it's just not going to make it at this point in this day and age. It's not going to make it. And I
true.
kind of see why with the Tropicana. One, it's showing its age, and
Yeah,
two, it's not even that tall of a building. It's only
right.
22 floors
It's
tall.
only 22 floors. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that tall. So I think it would be safe to say that, yeah, maybe I think it's time that the Tropicana goes. But the real reason that they're actually demolishing the Tropicana
Hmm.
is actually because they're gonna put like a baseball stadium or a venue there in its place.
Yeah, that's
Going to be a
correct.
massive venue that's going to replace the Tropicana. But
Yeah.
one other thing I did want to get into is that with a lot of like the older Las Vegas hotels, since again both of our elevator passions developed in Las Vegas, wanted to
Hmm.
mention that we're also into Vegas and their history. And part of
Hmm.
that history that Vegas has is that when there's an old building that they don't need anymore, they implode them. They
That's
implode,
correct.
yeah, they implode them. They put dynamite in its columns, and they strategically detonate each and every one of them.
Yeah. It's really interesting, just real quick, like so many hotels like have been imploded, like, and some of them, some people didn't even know existed. It's just crazy how Vegas, like you said, Jonathan, all these hotels they come and go and then they get destroyed, they get replaced by another hotel. I'll get into an example. One of my favorite Vegas implosions, excuse me, implosions was the Aladdin in 1998. And oh my god, I'm gonna tell you right now, that was
It
the
is.
most satisfying freaking implosion. That building just came down smooth like butter.
Yeah, it was like it's like literally like if you like if you like for example, if you like put your finger in a cup of jello, that's literally
Uh,
how like the building came down. It was like very smooth because of how actually one thing is that the Aladdin, it actually had a very poor support system. It had a very poor
True.
support system, and even the implosion engineers that were actually conducting the implosion, they
Hmm.
actually said like I would never be in this building if there were an earthquake because of how poor these structures were. And
Right.
like Joe said, it just came down very smoothly when they imploded that back in 1998. And
Yeah.
where the Aladdin was, it's now Planet Hollywood that stands
Planet
in its
Hollywood.
place, which is owned by
Correct.
Caesars, a
Correct.
massive entertainment company in Las Vegas.
Hmm.
They own a lot of hotels. Of course, the Caesar's Palace, Paris, Horseshoe, which used to
Hmm.
be Bally's, the
Valleys.
Cromwell, and so many more.
That's
Um,
right.
and yeah, my personal favorite of the Las Vegas implosions of like the very old hotels would have
Hmm.
to be the Sands, which is now replaced
Oh
by
yeah.
because
Venetian.
that one in particular, while I also understand Joe's point too with the Aladdin being like very smooth, and honestly I would agree with that. It's very satisfying. But
Hmm.
there's one thing about the Sands though that also is it's also really interesting. A really interesting fact is that out of any of the historic Las Vegas hotels, the Aladdin, I'm sorry, not the Aladdin, the Sands actually had the Sands actually used the most amount of dynamite in
Yeah.
cleaning up that building. They
Right.
actually used the most amount, and it was crazy to learn that, especially of how short that building was. Even shorter.
True.
I'd argue it's even smaller than the Aladdin is, and
True.
it's crazy that they used so much more dynamite. And again, that makes sense because again, as Joe said, the Aladdin had a very poor structural system, and it just came down smoothly like butter. It wasn't like
Hmm.
it was very easy to take that down. But the Sands probably on the other hand was something a little bit more rigid. It was a little bit something more with more of a robust support system.
Absolutely. Well, we hope this gives you a bit of a, insight on what will go into the Jonajo podcast, and what the, roadmap structure is going to be looking like when we, post more videos about this. And then, again, this particular podcast today, it's called Episode Zero. It's just mainly introduction about ourselves and our passion, where that came from for elevators, and why we're making this podcast in the first place. So in a way, I'm really looking, forward to what we have planned for this podcast coming up.
Yep, same here. And we look forward to seeing you guys again in episode 1. And next time we'll be talking a little bit more about the different elevator brands and that kind of thing. We're going a little bit more into depth. Like Joe said, this is more of like an introduction of like to let you guys know who we are and well, why we're doing this and all this kind of introductory stuff leading us into what we'll probably be seeing in the upcoming episode. So that's basically
Absolutely.
all that we have for you today for episode 0. Thank you
Hmm.
guys so much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you again in episode 1. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.